Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final session in American English Live Series 15. We're so excited that each of you are here with us today. My name is Kate, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Heather, who will be the moderator helping answer your questions and responding to your comments during the session. Let's begin today with these wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Alternatives to Classroom Debate with Stephanie Owens-Upadhyay. Abdoulaye in Senegal wrote, "Another fantastic webinar. It provided us tips to help us get ready to support our students on how to express opinions, negotiate meaning, and much more. Thank you so much." Wonderful comment. Thank you for that. And Katarina in Ukraine wrote, "Great low prep ideas." Excuse me. "I will definitely use them in my next English Access Micro Scholarship Program class." Wonderful, and we love that English Access Micro Scholarship Program, so we're so happy you can use it there. And Lubna in Algeria said, "I learned a lot from today's session. A successful debate is to learn from others' opinions and points of view through listening and interaction. The main thing isn't just winning, but learning." Absolutely, great comment. We love to see you, our teacher participants, actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering your feedback through the end of session quiz or by emailing us at americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next series. And as Series 15 comes to a close, let's take a look back at the themes we've explored together. We began with using music and sing out loud wordplay in the EFL classroom, moved on to project-based learning, and today we're looking at multi-level classes. What an exciting and excellent series it has been. Thank you to all our presenters and to you, our audience. So here's what to expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts and comments in the comments feature or chat box. And when our session comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. And once you've successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to receive your badge via email within about a week. And last, before we begin, we want to remind you about the fantastic AE Live Series 16 schedule we have planned for you in 2023. We will explore teaching about climate change in the first 2 webinars, and the remaining sessions will enhance your knowledge in relation to a variety of core ELT topics. You can use the link being shared in the chat and comments to receive reminders about Series 16. And now for today's webinar, opening and closing routines for multi-level classes. Teachers often wonder, how can I create a classroom that meets the needs of all my learners when I have so many different levels and types of students? Well, there is no one right answer to this question. An effective approach is to establish short routines and structures during the crucial first and final 5 minutes of every class. In this webinar, we will discuss why routines for the first and final minutes of class are important, and we'll examine specific opening and closing routines that provide language practice opportunities and develop academic skills for students of all levels. And now we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Richard Silberg. Richard recently retired after 39 years of teaching in primary and secondary classrooms in Berkeley, California. He taught numerous subjects with a focus on supporting English language learners. Richard has also taught English to refugee students in Albania, refugee families in California, and secondary students in China. He has taught ELT methodology in Uzbekistan and Cambodia, where he was an U.S. Department of State English Language Fellow and Specialist, and is currently working on a specialist project in Timor-Leste. Richard also has extensive experience in the theater arts as an actor, storyteller, director, and playwright. He earned a master's degree in education from the University of California, Berkeley, and a bachelor's in history from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome, Richard. It's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Kate. It's great to see you again. It's great to be here. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar on opening and closing routines for multi-level classrooms. Kate, I remember it was 2015 when I first was an English language fellow in Cambodia, and I'd gather teachers for viewing parties to watch the webinars that you hosted then. And we learned so much, and I am thrilled to be on the other side of the screen 7 years later, but here I am. And I want to talk about this topic that means a whole lot to me. How can we use the beginning of class and the end of class to work with multi-level classrooms? Let's just dive right in. We have a lot to cover in just under an hour. Let's look at our agenda for today. We're going to cover quite a few things. The first thing we're going to do is discuss why routines for the first and final minutes of class are important to successfully teach in multi-level environments. Then we're going to distinguish between opening routines, which I am calling opening routines, but also classroom routines and warm-up activities. There's a bit of an overlap between them, but we're going to see how they're different and why I start with the routines I'm going to present today. Then we're going to practice a few of the specific routines. We'll give the participants a chance to dive in and try them. And you'll try some too, Kate. And after that, we're going to have, or in the middle, we're going to have a bonus. We're going to identify a structured language practice strategy that you can use with these routines, of course, but you can use it throughout your lessons. And that's our plan for today. And before we kind of dive into the routines, I want to talk a little bit about what is a multi-level classroom? What does it look like? What does it seem like? So there are characteristics, and these characteristics come from both my observation in my own classroom and observing teachers around the world and talking to teachers. And I reduced it to three things that multi-level classrooms, in particular language classrooms, share. The first thing is students communicate in English at a variety of different levels. Then another identification feature is that students have different types of learning backgrounds, and students have different literacy level, even in their native language. So these are the characteristics of multi-level classrooms. What are the problems or challenges? Let's use the word challenge. What are some challenges associated with teaching in this type of environment? I'd love if the participants can jump in and write something in the chat about some challenges that they experience in teaching in these types of environments.
Yeah, let's hear from you, everybody. What are some challenges associated with teaching English in a multi-level classroom? What would you say? I know it can be really difficult to even know what all the different levels are in our classrooms. Sometimes we have so many. Sylvia, I think you agree with me, finding that exact level or maybe using the right vocabulary. Absolutely. What are some other challenges that are associated with teaching English in a multi-level classroom? Yep, Sylvia, maybe the students have different cultural backgrounds. The student's ability varies from let's see. Group work can be a challenge from Nauzad. Sometimes it's difficult to decide the best topic and agenda for the session from Zafar. You might lose the attention of the students from Makoto. There are fast learners and slow learners from Silva. Absolutely, we've all seen that. And you might not know how to balance all the levels from Babakar. Excellent, wonderful thoughts, everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Exactly. Those are the challenges. But what I'd like to do on the next slide is take a look at the challenges and see how we can turn them to our advantage. So some of the challenges were mentioned already, but I'm going to go through some that I had thought of. First challenge is finding appropriate teaching resources and material. Well, how can that be an advantage? Well, we become better at finding these materials and adapting the materials we have. Another challenge is organizing appropriate groupings within the class. Somebody had mentioned about groups. Well, how is that an advantage? Our students will learn how to work well in a group because we have to group. Another challenge is determining the individual needs of each student. And what can advantage be there? We are asking our students to become a little bit more independent and to take some control over their own learning. Another challenge is that we have to ensure that all students are challenged and interested, which I would call classroom management, because that can lead, especially with younger students, into some behavioral issues. Well, what's the advantage there? Is we need to get our students to become partners in their learning. So now we have some challenges and advantages, but we now need to look at some strategies. What are some strategies for working with multi-level classrooms? And I have a list of them, but I want to tell you that they not only come from my own experience, but I did a bit of research in preparation for this webinar, and I just went onto the American English website and just typed in multi-level classrooms. There is so much material available to give us strategies. So here are some key strategies that I gleaned from that. Strategy number one is to vary activities and vary groupings. Strategy number two is to develop and follow lesson plans with clear, obtainable student outcomes. And I want to focus on that word obtainable throughout today. Establish instructional routines and stick to them. So there's a time that you need to vary activities, but there have to be routines that are always in place as well. What's next? To make certain every student has an opportunity to practice the target language multiple times in every class at a level, and there's that word again, obtainable by them. And our final strategy is to conduct multiple informal formative assessments, which are ways of gathering information informally to help with your teaching. And it monitors student progress and also your own progress throughout your lesson. And it's been fascinating this whole month on Facebook Live, or on the American English Facebook page, I should say. There's been so much about assessment. I encourage people to look at those materials. They were really informative for me as well. Now, that's too many. That's like a big slide. And I once took a PowerPoint class and they said, don't put so much words on. So my next slide will show a better one. I have a picture and I'm only going to have two essential points. And the first point is to use the routines throughout, but especially for the first 5 to 10 minutes and final minutes of class. And the other important point that I want to focus on today is giving every student an opportunity to practice the target language multiple times in every class at an obtainable level. So yes, here we are in a webinar. I'm doing much of the talking, but in a classroom, I try to do as little as possible. So let's move into a question, our essential question. I always remembered when I was teaching history way back, I'd always have an essential question for the day, and making sure that everything we did kind of helped us answer that question. So our essential question that we want to keep in the back of our heads is, why are opening and closing routines important for multi-level classes? And I'm hoping all the things today will answer that question. So let's move in to our
one really nice comment that I just thought I'd share that sort of answers that question, but just one sentence, we need to hear the rest. He says, Fernando says, when we follow certain routines, it is easier and faster for students to get engaged, and it helps us maximize our class time. Wow, great
That's
comment.
Great.
Yeah.
I wish that person was here with me presenting, because they were exactly right. Perfect. Well, let's go into some opening routines that will get at what that person spoke of. The first routine, before routines, what am I thinking? It's the beginning, right? Opening routines are the very beginning. And to me, as a storyteller, I think about how do I open stories? A very traditional way to open a story is once upon a time. I once heard a Turkish storyteller have a really unique way of starting a story. They started it like this: once there was, and once there wasn't. And in Haiti, there's a tradition. The storyteller will appear before the audience and they'll come out and they'll say crick. And if the audience wants to hear a story, they'll shout out crack back. And it's this beautiful call and response: crick, crack, crick, crack. And then the story begins. Now, I'm not talking about storytelling today, but I want us to think of the classroom as a story with a really wonderful beginning, a good middle, and a solid end. So to keep us in that mindset, I am curious, we're from all over the world here. What are some storytelling openings that you know of from your own or other cultures? I'd love to see some of those in the chat.
Yeah, great question. That's a really interesting question. We have a nice one from Sidra. Once upon a time, or it was a dark and stormy night. Absolutely. Those are good ones. Good. What other storytelling openings do you know from your own or other cultures? How do you like to start a story? Maybe by asking a question from Abiha. What other ways have you begun a story? And I love that crick crack one. Karima says a freezing night. It was a freezing night. Absolutely. Okay, and John in Russia says there lived and there were is a time that, or is a way that sometimes he starts. Great. Karen says many years ago. Absolutely. All right, let's see one more. And yes, a couple of other people saying the same, like many years ago or a long time.
Yes, there are
Very,
many
very
ways.
good.
There are many ways to begin stories, aren't there? And they're very interesting. And I'm going to use some of those. But we're not talking about stories today. We're talking about classrooms. So once upon a time is a good way to begin a story. But what are some ways that you begin your classes? I'm very curious because everybody has different types of routines that they use. And I'm curious at what they are.
Yeah, let us know. What are some ways that you begin your classes? I remember when I was teaching, I sometimes just did something very simple and just said, okay, everyone, open your notebook and get out your pen. That was just something to get them started, to get them ready. Maybe they write the objective down in their notebooks or they write the date, something like that. Let's see here. Fernando, another great thought from Fernando here. He says, opening routines are very important because they have the power to truly engage students. They should be interesting and puzzling if possible. Wow. I agree. We should have him come on over to the, no, very good. Thank you. Let's see. Salvador says he starts by telling an anecdote or a story. Very nice. Greeting the students from definitely. Ask a question like, how was your homework? Salute or greet the students from Danish. Start the class with something interesting from the news. Interesting. That's a good one. With a brain exercise, warm-ups, and talking about a certain topic or a question to get a conversation going. Great. Great job, everybody. Thank you.
There's some fascinating ways to begin a class that people already have. So today I'm just going to suggest a way of thinking that I've come to about how to begin classes. I used to begin classes with warm-ups. And then, and I'm distinguishing today between a warm-up and the opening routines I've settled on. So the best way to talk about the differences between those is to show you some. I'm going to show you two warm-ups. One's through a video. This is a warm-up I used while I was training these teachers in Cambodia in 2019. And they were TESOL candidates learning how to be teachers. Here's a warm-up. If you could start the video, that would be fantastic.
Breath release. Breathe in. Release. New breath. And release. All right, you may sit.
You can see everybody was in a good mood and ready to begin the session. The next warm-up is similar in the sense that it's a practice. I'm going to do it with you, Kate. And here's just a picture of the same group of students I had. This is an articulation exercise I learned as an actor, and I do it before every performance. And it goes something like this. I'm going to say something and then you say it back. Pa 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 pa.
Pa 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 pa.
Ba 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 ba.
Ba 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 ba.
Ta 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 ta.
Ta 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 ta.
Da 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 da.
Da 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 da.
Ka 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 ka.
Ka 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 ka.
Ga 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 ga.
Ga 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 ga.
And when the students know how to do it, we do it really fast. It goes like this. Pa 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 pa, ba 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 ba, ta 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 ta, da 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 da, ka 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 ka, ga 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 ga. And that's getting your tongue to move and getting ready for the sounds of English. And these are great exercises. I love them, but I don't start my class with them anymore because I want to show you the difference with the next slide about the difference between warm-ups and opening routines. So warm-ups, and we'll go through each one. Number one is it's generally fun and it's motivating, and it's usually an activity or game, and it prepares students for class. The second feature of a warm-up is it's usually the whole class is participating all at once. Next, we have that they're short, they're fast-paced. Next, we get students warmed up for the main lesson. They're low pressure, they're fun, they're engaging, and they're teacher directed. Now, the opening routines that I'm going to go through today have specific language objectives with high frequency exposure to whatever it is you're doing. So the students are doing a lot of language work right from the get-go. And the students, and this is really key, they can do it alone or in groups after practice without teacher input. Students can access at their current level. They can be modified up or down. They require very little teacher prep. They're also low pressure, and they last a little bit longer though. They're not as quick paced. But the key is they're student centered. And these are some of the routines. These characteristics are what we've learned through research are effective ways of working with multi-level classrooms. So what's my approach now to setting up my class? Let's go to the next slide. My approach is now to start off with an opening routine that takes about 5, maybe 10 minutes. Then I do classroom routines, which are different. Things like take the attendance, collect the homework. You notice I'm not doing that the very first thing. Announcements. Then I do a warm-up, which gets us ready for the main lesson. Then, even if I'm pressed for time, and you'll see that today, the exit and closing routine is as important as the opening, but it doesn't take as long. So even if it feels like we're spending a lot of time on opening routines, we will get to closing routines. So that's how I plan. In a sense, my opening routine is a warm-up before the warm-up. What routines are we going to explore today? I'm just going to share 3 of them today, but we will have a link to a whole list and descriptions of other opening routines I've used. We're going to do mentor sentences, we're going to do quote analysis, and we're going to explore vocabulary categorization. So let's get right started with mentor sentences. So in the beginning, students walk into the class, and once they're trained in the technique, they see a sentence on the board, or if you're doing a Zoom class, on the screen. Let's take a look at one mentor sentence. And this one actually comes from a textbook I'm writing right now for the country of Timor-Leste. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get these opening routines into an actual text? And so here's a sentence, a very simple sentence. And I should say this is a beginning level English class. The students are 7th graders, but they have had no exposure to English formally yet. So it's level A1, maybe A2. And they've already encountered through total physical response, TPR, and other techniques, these vocabulary words. The student sits. And we also have a picture to support them. The next slide will tell us the steps. The first thing the students do when they see it is they copy the sentence in their student notebook. Then after they copy the sentence, they actually talk with their elbow partner, which is the person sitting next to them, or sometimes a table group. A lot of it depends on how your class is set up. But I want them to talk about what they notice about the sentence, word order, spelling, meaning, anything they can think about. And then they'll share, after the routine is over, one thing. Either they're going to share it on paper or with class. We'll talk about sharing techniques. And they use this sentence starter. We notice that. Now, I want our participants to tell me something they notice about this sentence the student sits. It could be anything, and this is key too. You're going to enter it at whatever level you're at. You know, if you're brand new to English, you might see some things that others don't. And if you're more experienced in English, like say you have a PhD in English literature, you might see something totally different. Whatever level you're at, it's obtainable for you. And also, one more thing while people are writing in the chat is for very beginning levels, I want the students to be talking in their first language, their primary language, because they don't have the English yet to examine it critically. They'll get there. So what are some things you notice in the sentence?
Yeah, what do you notice about this sentence, everyone? Remember to focus on the sentence even more than you're focusing on the image there. What do you notice about the sentence? What do you think? Let's take a look. So, all right. Mai says the student is ready to study. That's true. What else do you notice about the sentence itself? Let's see, someone notices the S at the end of the verb. Absolutely. Very good. What else do you notice? Let's see, it is 3 words long. Absolutely. Good. It begins with a capital letter. Wonderful. What else do you notice about this sentence? It's in the present tense from Tracy. Great. It has a period at the end, definitely. It's a statement. Yep, very good. And a few other people who are saying it is in the simple present tense. Absolutely. And one more says it's in the third person. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great, great. And you notice people are entering it at whatever level their understanding is, which is one of the features of how you ways of working with multi-level classrooms. So once we get that, then we get to the next step. And the next step is a supported approach for this level of making a new sentence using that same language structure, that same grammar, if you will. So Kate, I'm going to ask you, be a student, choose one word from column A, one word from column B, and one word from column C, and make a new sentence.
All right, let's see here. A friend listens.
A friend listens. And there we have that step. And I really scaffolded it for you so we could support you at your level. But let's go to the next step, which is the student, either alone or with a partner, a lot of it depends on what you're wanting, writes an original sentence using in the same structure, the same word, 3-word sentence. And this allows them to share vocabulary they might know that we haven't studied yet, because maybe a student has had private English lessons, or maybe they have a cousin who speaks a little English, or maybe they watch a lot of YouTube and they got English from that. And they're writing their own 3-word sentence. Okay, let's go to the next step. What happens if you have a more advanced class, or it's a year later and these students are getting to B1 or C1 level in English? Let's look at some advanced mentor sentences. Kate, I'm going to ask you this time to read that sentence out loud.
Sure. The sentence said, this was a deer, or says, this was a deer mouse, a little creature with big eyes and long hind legs like a miniature kangaroo.
And this is a much more complex sentence than the student sits. Let's go to the next slide and we'll see how we use our routine. I could just say, what do you notice about the sentence? But here I'm also trying to show that I, as a teacher, can help students guide them in their thinking. So Kate, I'm going to ask you again to be a student. There's an underlined section to the sentence. It answers a question. What question does it answer? And you can use, or what information does it tell you? You can use one of the sentence frames if you'd like.
Yeah, so let's see. The underlined phrase answers the question, what is a deer mouse? Or how do you describe a deer mouse?
Great, great. And let's go to the next step. So once they've done that, they're going to imitate. And we could do it like this with just a sentence. But if we want support, we can have a sentence frame. And if we want more support, I would sometimes model it with my own sentence. And here's one that I wrote about my daughter. She is my daughter. And now I have to answer the question. Tell me more about her. Oh, an artist who creates her work by painting and then carving on large pieces of wood, like a combination printmaker, wood carver, and painter. And I included a piece of her art there. So there we have it. That's our sentence imitations. That's how you do it, but or I should say mentor sentences. Let's go to the next slide and you'll see what I'm doing while this is happening. So this is from adult learners in Uzbekistan last summer. Take a look at this video and you can see how it plays itself out in the classroom.
Drawing quickly in her notebook. My son is playing noisily in the room. I like it. Here's yours.
My teacher is explaining slowly with a smile or smile.
So you can see we had really quick interactions. And in some ways, it's another way of working with multi-level classrooms is you have one-on-one interactions that don't last very long, but can be very impactful. Here with this student, as you can see, she crossed out the word before smile because she wasn't sure, do I use the indefinite article or not? And we had a nice conversation about that. And there you go. That's what it looks like in the classroom. I could visit 10 or 15 students very quickly. Let's go to the next slide and we'll look at where sentences come from. I get the sentences from the student text. I get them from stories, novels, articles the students are reading. I create my own sentences if there's a particular or specific language structure or pattern I want them to know. And there are actually sentence imitation workbooks commercially available. It's a whole nother way to go. Let's do a little bit of summary about what we've learned about mentor sentences. Mentor sentences help guide students. And I want you to always, I would keep the same routine for a few weeks before introducing a new one. So students really get that routine. Keep the sentence simple at first, even if they're at a high level. Start with a simple sentence so people are comfortable with the routine, the procedure, then you can make it more complex. Keeping in mind, one of our goals is learner autonomy, which is our students' ability to work independently. And that frees you as a teacher to interact with students who need more support, or even with those who you wish to go further with in brief, conversations. I even have sometimes work with groups while this is happening, if they need that kind of support. So the students have done it. What do they do if they finish early? We're going to get to that. We're going to share after I do all the opening routines. We'll share some other routines that students can do on their own, freeing you to interact with others.
Wonderful. And we have some really nice comments. Hella wrote, great, I like this approach. The teacher is the facilitator. Absolutely. And Salita wrote, love the activity. The teacher just guides and students discover on their own or by themselves. Wonderful. Great comments. Thank you, everyone.
That's a brilliant comment. I love the idea of being a guide because that's what a mentor is. And in some ways, a sentence does it for you. The students have done this. What do you do with the sentences? Well, depends on your time. You could have no sharing at all. And you assess the student understanding, a formative assessment, as you walk the room. Or sometimes what I do is I collect maybe 10 notebooks a day So I don't want to read 50 sentences, but I just get a sense of that. You could have the students partner share, table share. That doesn't take very long. You could have, whoa, it's a bonus time, happy bonus. You could use one of these strategies. I'm going to share with you my favorite structured language practice strategy, which gives students an opportunity to practice the target language multiple times. And it's called Give One, Get One, sometimes known as hands up, stand up, pair up. And we can go to the next slide, which will show us, or it's sometimes called Go, Go, Go. So let's go through how you do it. The students have written their sentence, they copied it, they wrote what they noticed, they wrote their imitation, and then they stand up and hold up their notebook. And when they look around the room and they see who else is finished, because not everybody finishes at the same time, and they find that other student who's ready, and then they go and sit with them and they share their sentences. And when they're finished sharing, so here we have some listening, reading, speaking, all of it's happening. They put their hands up again and they find another partner and they repeat that process. They share with another partner and they do that until each person has had the chance to share with 3 partners. So in this way, students have had multiple opportunities to practice that target language, not just on paper, but 3 times, speaking it and listening. So that technique will be described in some of the links we'll share with you at the end. But there you go. Let's go to the next slide and we'll look at what the mentor sentence does. Does it meet our features of structured opening routines? There are specific language objectives. Students can do it alone or in groups without the teacher. Students can access at the current level, and it can be modified up and down. And it requires very little teacher prep. It's very low pressure. Really, the sentence imitation is 5 minutes. That's all it's going to take. And there you go. So mentor sentences have been done. It's time for another routine. Maybe it's a month into it and it's time for a new routine, quote analysis. This is a pretty high level routine. And the way it works is you have a quote. And I'll talk about how you choose your quotes in a moment. But right now we have this quote that I'm using to let my students know that routines are important. So here's one. The secret of your futures is hidden in your daily routine. The procedure is the students copy the quote into their notebook. They read the quote 3 times to themselves and then to their partner. And then they identify the topic. So this gives them a chance to use the language they know. The topic of the quote is routines. The quote is about daily habits, whatever they can say. And what I just want to make sure we're encouraged to do is go slow at first. Take our time so students are familiar with the routine, okay? And then they'll be able to work without you. But of course, in the first times, you have to help them with it. Okay, they've identified the quote, they've identified the topic. What do they do next? Well, they do an analysis. They're going to tell us what the author is saying, not their opinion yet, but what the author is saying. The best way to demonstrate this is through an example from a class I was teaching of adult learners. This student was much higher skilled or experienced in English than the others. And so she was able to enter this quote at a high level. She wrote in his quote about routine, Murdoch's perspective, she used that frame, is that if someone wants to gain their goals in any part of their life, they shouldn't stop trying, for even small drops can break a stone. I still love reading that. Brilliant, and it's her approach. So they've done that step. There's still one more step, isn't there? There's students thinking. We want to encourage the students to either agree with the quote, disagree with the quote, to share their thinking. And this is also just an academic skill, is how do you agree with something, or better yet, how do you disagree with something in a respectful way? So let's take a look at some of the sentence starters that I provide my students with. It's on the next slide. We can give them these sentences. I agree because, that's how I see it too, because, lots of ways And what I often have is I have these on a big butcher paper that I can bring from class to class, especially if you're the teacher that doesn't have your own room. You can do that. And let's go to the next step and we'll see how a student worked on it. And as that pop-up came up, you don't always have to have those supports. You can always pull them back, what's called a gradual release of responsibility. So here's a student who wrote their opinion about this quote from Cesar Chavez. If you really want to make friends, go to their house and eat with them. The people who give you their food, give you their heart. And she wrote, that makes sense, because if a person is able to share their food, that is a person I would like to know and be friends with. And the day after this quote, she came and brought me some aram that she made at home. So she took the quote to heart. All right, so there is a way of using quote analysis, but now here's something that you can do. Once you establish the mentor sentences, you can actually use the quote as a more complex mentor sentence if your students are ready for it. And I just wanted you to see that example so you can go from one routine to the other once the students know each routine. So where do the quotes come from? I do internet searches all the time, quotes about. They can be stories, they can be novels, you can get them from articles the students are reading. And once in a while, a student will make a contribution. Give me a quote. That's really gold. Let's go to the next slide. How do we share the sentences? It's going to be exactly the same in notebooks, in small groups and pairs, as a class, choosing a few random students to read their quote, or using a structured language practice strategy. So there we have those kinds of things. And let's do a little summary of the quote analysis. Let's take a look at each item. The quotes can be inspirational, or they can be tied into a theme from your curriculum. Provide extensive scaffolding for the first sessions, then remove and reduce them when students are ready. Stick with the routine for a few weeks before introducing another routine. Very important. Decide on how the students are going to share, some accountability, some assessment, all things like that. So there we go. That's our quote analysis. And now we are going to go to our next opening routine. Oh, before we do, we want to make sure, does the opening routine of quote analysis meet all the objectives? Yes, look at that. They do all the things that we set out to do. Okay, the next routine, I believe, are vocabulary categories. And this is one of my favorites as well. That's why I included it here. Let's jump right in, see what it looks like. Categorization is taking a bunch of different items. And we know this from preschool teaching and young learners, is helping them categorize. But we're going to do it with words. So here's a group of words that my students had studied in the past. And maybe it was a month ago they studied these words. Who knows? And car, planet, elevator, baseball, bicycle, swimming, school, hospital, meteor. So I asked them to, in groups, to what categories do you see? How can you categorize them based on the meaning, not like whether they're a noun or a verb, but based on meaning? So I'm going to ask our audience, and you too as well, Kate, what categories do you see? How can you organize these words?
Yeah, let us know, everybody. What categories do you see here? I definitely see some activities, some forms of maybe some exercise types of activities. What else do you see, everybody? What categories do you see represented here? I also see types of transportation, like elevator is sort of a type of transportation, car and bicycle, absolutely. Let's see, space from Valentina. Abija says exercise. Anu says sports. Oh, you could even categorize them by the number of syllables from Kira. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that. Public places, vehicles, and space from and Micah Todd says sports and places. Great, thanks, everyone.
That's great. And the real value isn't in saying, well, here are the categories I, as a teacher, came up with. The real value is in the thinking that students need to do. Let's go on to another kind of categorization, just so you can see the different ways of doing it. This is from a student text that my class was reading, How to Make a Good Impression. And I took keywords, put them up on the board, and I asked them to sort the words into the following categories: positive and negative, people and feelings, and then, of course, to make their own categories. And what's interesting about doing it this way is the conversation students will have. I remember one student put fear in positive, and I remember other students in his group saying, wait a minute, how is fear positive? And this student said, it's like when I'm playing a sport, I get really nervous, I'm scared, but it motivates me, and that's positive. So that's the value of doing it that way. But where can our words come from? This obviously came from an article, but it can also come from the student text. Past units of study are very important. There's enough research that indicates we need to retrieve or revisit past vocabulary. Common English word lists is a very good place. Signs in English throughout the community, social media, wherever words live, you can find them. So once we got there, let's just go through a summary of this activity. Oh, we have to share it. You're going to see it's always the same. Keep on going through all of these in notebooks only, in small groups, randomly choose, or of course, our bonus, using a structured language practice strategy. Lots of ways to share. Now we're going to just summarize and rationale. Why are vocabulary categorizations good? Here we go. It helps with the principles of association and depth. You really have to think about the words in order to make a category. Let's say you come up with a partially known word, you're not sure. I had a wonderful video that I had to cut for time of me working with a student as he tried to come up with a category. It was really interesting to see the struggle and then the aha moment. Next, we have bringing attention to keywords, a minimal focus on less important words. There are so many words in English, right? And students do this in group, and they must use critical thinking skills to justify their category choices. So for me, this is also a critical thinking activity. And it's supporting retrieval of long ago studied vocabulary. So we're going to now, as promised, talk a little bit about what routines early finishers can do, because some people will finish faster than others. And this is where you're building student autonomy and independence. Here's a whole list of some. And these are from the teacher edition I'm writing right now for Timor-Leste. So we're giving you a link so you can access each of these activities. We're not going to go into them today. And probably you have other routines that students can do when finished. And there we finished with the 3 I wanted to share. And I want to make sure they all do it, because that was that question. Why are multi-level, or remember our essential question from the beginning? Why are multi-level, why are opening routines, why are opening routines important for multi-level classrooms? Well, it has to do these things. And sure enough, each of them does it. There's a specific language objective. Students can do it alone or in groups. Students can access at their current level. It requires very little teacher prep and it's low pressure. So there we have it. Now, we spent a lot of time on the opening. And how much time do we have left? Maybe 10 minutes, something like that, or 15. And this is similar to a class. You spend a lot of time on your opening. You're doing a lead-in or an opening routine. You're doing classroom routines. You're doing a warm-up. You have your main lesson. And suddenly you look at the clock and class is going to end. But you need a satisfying ending to a story. You need a satisfying ending to your class. So what are some end of class routines that you can do, even if you don't have a lot of time? So I am curious, how do you end your classes? What do you do now?
Yeah, let us know, everybody. What are some ways that you end your classes? And I was saying at the earlier session today that one thing I used to do was to do exit tickets. That was something that I like to do at the end of my class. Let's see. Reflection from absolutely. Exit song. That sounds really fun, Christelle. Santi does a summary. Great. What are some other things? Manana also says exit tickets. Anu also says summarizing. Great. What are some other things that you do to end your class? All right. And a lot of other people saying reflections and feedback and exit tickets as well. So thanks, everyone.
I love exit song idea. I can almost see having a summary of the class, if you can be spontaneous with an exit song. We should do a webinar on exit songs. So I love the way people have ended. I'm going to show you some ways that I do. I have 3 things I'm going to share with you today. One of them is called What Do You Know? Or which is a short, fast English way of speaking for what do you know? Then words, phrases, questions Mr. Richard or Mr. S was asked about or thought about today. And of course, exit tickets. So let's describe each one. Let's describe what do you know first. What do you know? It starts off like this. It's in some ways, it's a reflection on today's work. We just did a vocabulary study today, a unit on food. So we're going to do a what do you know? And what happens is the students work in teams and they write or they make a chart, just like the one, an alphabet chart like this, or you can print them up if you have access to that. They also need a dice. Player 1 rolls the dice, or the leader, if you prefer to take control of it, will roll the dice and they keep on rolling. Meanwhile, while they're rolling the dice, player 2 is writing down words or phrases related to the topic. And let's use food as the topic, because I love food, and so do you, I'm sure. Write as many words or phrases as possible in the correct box. So, for instance, if a phrase for food, could you pass the vegetables, please? Could be a phrase under P. And they roll until they get a 6. When they get a 6, they switch. And now player 1 writes and player 2 is rolling. And they keep on going back and forth, and they're writing on the same piece of paper. They're collaborating, creating knowledge of what they learned, sharing, until the teacher says time. Yes, the students all write on that table or on that chart. I'm going to show you a finished chart from a group of students, again, with food, and you can see all the different words that they had. Evening meal for E. I'm full for I, as well as intestines. Restaurant, congratulations to that student for spelling it correctly. It's one word that always gives me trouble. Make your own. Yesterday, we had the same thing. So it gives them a chance to explore and share their knowledge. And you can do it with any topic. So that's what do you know? And I have directions for that. But the dice, let's say you don't have access to them. Well, on the American English website, the Activate Games for Learning part, you can make dice and the students can have it. It took me a few minutes to make. It's great, great resource. And there you have it. What do you know? The next activity is one I used a lot with my students who are very new to English. And this is actually from my notes from Thursday, November 29th, 2018, 4 years ago. You know how it is when students are working on the main task and they're in groups or they're working alone, and students will call you over, Mr. S, come over here. I have a question. They ask you a question. It's a brilliant question, and you wish you could stop everybody and say, hey, let's listen to this question, but you don't want to interrupt the flow. So what I've done is I carry a small notebook like this. I keep it in my back pocket. Can you see it? And I keep it in my back pocket. And what I do is I write down things that occur to me or I'm asked about during the period. And at the end, after I do give a homework and after I do any classroom routines, my end of class routine is to talk about the things I was asked. And you can see all the variety of things people must have been asking me. What word is it when you want somebody to agree with you? Well, that you can see how convince and persuade, and lots of different things come up. It's really, it was valuable and students really looked forward to it. They were very excited when I shared something they asked. They felt very proud. And then let's go to exit tickets. Everyone knows exit tickets, often called tickets out the door, lots of different things. I am curious at some of the ideas for exit tickets that you've tried or heard of. In your
Yeah,
own
let us
classes.
know. Yeah, I know when I was teaching, we'd love to hear from you, everybody. Please tell us. Okay, so maybe writing a tongue twister, that's a good one from Sylvia. Something I would do is do something very simple and just say, what did you learn today? Let's see, what other things have you used for exit tickets or maybe questions? Question about the lesson from Sylvia. What are some other ideas you might have? Maybe you could have the student draw the activity that you did. Let's see. You could ask them, what surprised you the most today? That's a great question. Great. Farman says exit tickets are new for him. That's fine. It's just usually it's a piece of paper that the student gives to you on their way out the door. Or you could ask questions like what was easy, what was difficult, etc. Or you could say, describe the class with one word. Those are all wonderful ideas. Thanks, everyone.
They are wonderful ideas. Let me get to that question about what exit tickets are. Yes, as Kate mentioned, you can show my ideas at the same time that I'm doing this. You ask the students to write, but sometimes when I'm really pressed for time, I stand at the door and I'll say, tell me a word you know from today's lesson. And the students have to say the word as they're going out. But whatever I do, I make sure it's the last thing I do. So I make sure I do classroom routines, such as giving homework and things of that sort before the end of class activity. And my ideas are, I love the idea of what surprised you the most today. I wrote that down because I'm going to use that. But you can see, you can make it as simple or as complicated as you want. They're quick and flexible. Exactly. Good. So we have exit tickets, exit ideas. Let's just do a recap. We've covered a lot of stuff. We've covered opening routines. We've covered some of the things about multi-level classrooms, but some helpful tips for you to think about. Always practice or model an activity first with your students. So when you're doing sentence imitation, I recommend you actually doing it for them first. And then the next day is their turn. That way they're getting a sense of it. Focus on one routine at a time before introducing a new one. And always remember that routines do take time and teacher direction at first, but it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of worry too, because you know your opening is set. Plan ahead. If the students are going to move, where and how? How much time can you devote to the routine? If you don't have much time that day because there's something big that you're planning, maybe just do a quick sentence imitation. Code analysis can take a little bit more time. How much scaffolding will you need at first? And how can you take it away if need be? Once you establish the routine, what's the best use of your time and which students will need the most support? So let's go through and make sure we've covered everything we wanted to today. Our agenda. Kate, did we discuss why routines for the first and final minutes of class are important and distinguish between opening routines, classroom routines, and warm-ups?
We did.
Good. Can we did we practice specific routines to implement in the first and final minutes of class?
You bet, we did it.
You betcha. And did we have our bonus?
Yes, that was the fun. We all love those bonuses.
Yeah, bonuses are great. And I could do a whole webinar on structured language practice strategies. They're very important. So we accomplished our agenda, but now we need an exit ticket of our own. We need to finish. So I've done all the business. The classroom routine was going through the agenda. And now the end of class routine is an exit ticket. You're going to write your exit ticket in the chat. A is a word or phrase you learned in the webinar. B, you're only going to choose one. B is something you learned in the webinar. C, what do you want to know more about? That will inform Kate and the team about other things. And D, what was most interesting for you in the webinar? So share your responses and include the prompt letter before your response so we know what you're responding to.
Yeah, let us know, everybody. What is, you can choose A, B, C, or D, word or phrase you learned, something you learned, what do you want to know more about, or what was the most interesting part of the webinar? Let us know. A lot of people are saying exit tickets were something new that they learned. Wonderful, great to hear it. What else? Christelle says a word or phrase learned was exit ticket. Very nice. Great. Go ahead and write the first letter and then you can add a description. So something I learned in the webinar were those mentor sentences. And I really like the different levels of the mentor sentences that you can have students practice writing. Let's see. I learned the difference between warm-ups and opening routines. Absolutely, from Valentina. Thank you. I learned that another person said the same thing from Anna said the same thing. Wonderful. And we have a couple of nice comments. Kiran says, this was genuinely awesome. I agree, Kiran. Thank you. And another comment, thanks for the meaningful session. Successfully chosen strategies are the guarantee of a productive lesson. That's from Anu. Absolutely wonderful. Great, everyone. Well, thank you so much.
Well, that's fantastic. I loved hearing those comments. And, you know, I'm reading one right now. It says warm-ups and opening routines to get into a mindset. And I think, you know, that person, I think it's Hazel, really captured why these are important. We're wanting our students to get into the mindset of being independent, autonomous learners. And yes, it's great to do fun activities, and I do them all the time because I was a drama teacher, for goodness sake. That's my bread and butter. But I want them to walk in the class, get in the mindset, we're going to do this, and they know what to do. That's the best part. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kate, for your brilliant moderation.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was really a fun webinar, and we have so many great comments coming in. Lots of people saying thanks. Lots of people saying it was amazing, such as Makoto and Luis and Ilham and Hazel. So we appreciate that, everyone. And thanks so much, Richard, for sharing with us.